Humdrummity, humdrummity, humdrummity.
Hello again, listener, and welcome back. Mentorship is traditionally imagined as the wise, aged sage imparting wisdom from on high to eagerly engaged young disciples. But in the modern era, this perception needs to be demystified and redefined. As an applied developmental psychologist, Dr. Deborah Heiser began researching the positive mental outcomes of aging. This work led her to the revelation that giving back is the ultimate means to achieve life fulfillment. With this understanding, she went on to found the Mentor Project, which in turn provided her with the insights to author the book, The Mentorship Edge. Today, she will discuss how hierarchical mentorship, while still relevant, is no more meaningful than lateral mentorship, why it is equally important for the old to learn from the young, and how the mentor-mentee relationship needs to be organic for best results. Tune in to find out why OK Boomer signaled the demise of ageist sagacity. All right, put on your mentee hat and let's learn a thing or two. Hi, Deborah, and welcome to Humdrummity.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to connect with you. Now, for context, can you tell the listening audience where in the world you are located today?
I am in Long Island, New York, in the United States.
Okay. Now, are you a native New Yorker?
No, I'm originally from the middle of the country in
Oh,
Iowa.
in Iowa. Okay. So, what prompted you to move to New York? And has being there helped your professional career?
Yes, I went to I got my PhD in applied developmental psychology. And I was so fortunate that the school I attended, which was Fordham University, they had so many connections in New York that I just got started right away and never really had to look back. And I took the advice of someone actually where I worked before, and they said, go to graduate school where you want to work because it's hard to leave a place because you get connections. So I was quite fortunate that I have always had opportunities in New York.
Well, that sort of segues nicely into how I'd like to start this discussion. Is I'd like to go over your professional career and path that led you to where you are today with creating the Mentor Project and authoring the book, The Mentorship Edge. So, could you just give us a quick history of your training, your professional career, and what led you to the endeavors that you are working on today?
So it's been a long, winding path. I became a psychologist because of, seeing my grandmother becoming depressed from taking a medication for an illness that she had. And seeing her depressed after being such an amazingly vibrant woman really inspired me to become a psychologist because someone there where she lived said, we're going to fix her. And they did. And I said, my goodness, I want to fix grandmas. So that was the
Mhm.
first step. I got a job at Cornell Westchester, a psychiatric hospital, after I graduated college and worked on the geriatric unit in research. And from there, I really said to myself, I want to do research. I want to continue with this. Went on to graduate school and at Fordham. And then I realized at that point, hey, I have an opportunity to do just what I always wanted to do, which is find ways to fix grandmas out there. And so I started a research department in Upper New York City, look and was able to do things like research depression, frailty, end of life issues, palliative care, all of those things that no one wants to talk about at cocktail parties. So um, when I was doing that, I really thought, this is it. I've landed. I'm doing great work. I had a book that came out and I was young in my career. And I thought, wow, I'm making my mark. And I couldn't wait to go to this one dinner party and where everybody was going to be. And I was really prepared to like show off to all these people. And I was like patting myself on the back, like, wow, I'm coming in with all of this cool stuff I'm doing. Everyone is going to just be so thrilled to hear from me. And they're going to think I'm so amazing. And I get to this dinner party and it's my turn to speak, and no one was excited. It was like
Oh, no.
crickets. And somebody said to me who sat across from me, what are you doing? Um, you're putting a band-aid on on the things that are bad for us in our future. What do we have to look forward to?
Mm,
And, at the moment I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have an answer for this person. I really am just putting a band-aid on all of the things that scare us about our futures. So I left that dinner saying to myself, I need to figure out the answer to this, and went back to the research and all the theories about aging and looked at developmental psychology. And I was like, gee, there's so much out there. It's just not making it to the mainstream. Nobody's hearing about all of this. So I pivoted and I started to look at what we have to expect that's positive when we age. And it's a lot more than is negative. So our emotional trajectory was what I sort of um, gripped onto. And in midlife, we have this stage that's sort of the pivot point where we get to and we stop saying, I want to take things in,
mm,
all the things that move us and advance us into a career. And we hit an emotional stage where we say to ourselves, hey, I just took in all this stuff. I checked 1,000,001 boxes to get where I am. Now what? Do I matter? What did
mm.
I contribute? It becomes an emotional stage where we question ourselves. Do we need to do more? Did we make an impact where we wanted to? Are we relevant? Are we valued? Are we useful? So the thing I want people to remember is, what is the original goal that maybe was on the plate for you? What are you really looking for? And it's really fulfillment and it's happiness, and that is achievable and that is attainable. And even people will always say to me, well, depression is out there looming. First of all, you shouldn't expect to get depressed. But if you are, you can expect to get better.
Mm.
There are things that can come in our way, just like, you could have an accident and break a bone. You should expect to get better, right? And that's how we should look at our life, is that we should constantly be seeking fulfillment and how we can get there, and we will achieve that. Most people that you talk to are feeling a level of that. And when they aren't, that's a tweak and they can get right back on. So we all have something to look forward to all the way until our last breath.
Right. So obviously, without sounding too much like a platitude, life is a series of peaks and valleys. And
Yeah.
when we find ourselves in a valley, what can we do to reapproach that and start to climb the hill again?
Connect with others,
Mm,
because everyone around us is a person who can reflect back to us what we need. If I go back to my grandmother, people said to her, "Oh, you're not yourself. Let's get you to where you need to be." And those who are around us, who we're connected with regularly, are the ones who say, oh, "Hey, there's something different here. Let's get you back on track." It's as simple as that. So if we're not really well connected, which occasionally can happen, I like to give the example of Ebenezer Scrooge. He's the fictional character from
mm,
Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and he was a self-made guy. He checked all the boxes. He lived in a mansion and had, people taking care of all of his needs, but he was miserable. And it wasn't until he connected with people that he changed his outlook. And that movie captures it exactly how it is. I've been able to see that light switch for people, or turn for people who are feeling like they're stuck or they aren't really where they want to be, and then they get that magical connection where they feel relevant again. They feel like they are, understood, that they are valued, that they are useful, that they have a purpose. And then it switches immediately, just as quickly as it did for A Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge character.
from what you're saying, it is important to connect with, with people and have possibly a sounding board, because other people may be able to observe us and say, yeah, there's something not right. Our self-awareness may not be attuned to seeing where we are in our life trajectory.
There's a big movement for social prescribing because
Mm,
people don't know how to connect. Um, and social prescribing is really big in England, and it's now becoming more popular in the United States. And I don't know how popular it is in Canada, but it's where healthcare professionals will prescribe social activities for people to combat loneliness. And I wrote an article in Psychology Today about that, and I highlighted what UJA and some of the folks there are doing to combat loneliness as an effort in communities in the United States. And so, when we think of social media as being a sort of a demon, I don't think it is. People were always lonely before. But in terms of how we are right now, we are used to being a little bit more siloed, even, before the big pandemic. We were used to being siloed. Part of that was that we didn't engage, we stopped engaging in, and that was in the 80s or so, civic engagement, so that
Mm.
you were said, build your brand, make it a social highway that makes you go up, 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 put your blinders on. It's all about you being a solo person to get to your needs. So as we've checked our boxes, we've said, I must maintain my own way and not be connected with others. And so now we have to tell people, put those blinders off, take those blinders off, bring those walls down and let people in. And, the generation that was used to civic engagement, where it was part of school life, has an easier time getting back to that. But there's a whole few generations, like 4 generations, that are just not used to that.
Mm.
My kids' generation was not encouraged to do social civic engagement. And we were able to see that in things like voting changes and ways in which people got out. We're starting to see more of that now, where the silos are kind of coming down a little bit. And I think social prescribing and connections being a big part of our life is going to help us with that.
I do like this idea of social prescribing because I think that is what the world needs more of. And this comes up as an idea that I think about quite a lot, and it could almost be its own theme for a podcast. But this idea of like, are we out of the COVID bubble? Like, have we fully recovered from all the social implications and changes to the way we interact in our daily lives? Because people now are working from home more. So they're still in this isolation. We're still in this isolation mindset, I believe. For me, it's quite funny because a while ago, Starbucks finally put the cream and milk back out to self-serve it, and I was like, "Oh, is this Starbucks? Drawing a line in the sand that says, COVID is officially over because now you can handle the cream and put it in your own coffee."
It may be, I think you're right. We are a changed world in some ways. And I think the silver lining with all of it is that we are more connected than ever, right? We're the way that we are. Does that make us less lonely? We can be lonely in a crowd.
Hmm.
The issue is that, are we meaningfully connected? Do we feel like in the sea of people that we're engaged with, are we really feeling like they care about us? And do we really feel like we matter to them? And that's really when I talk about generativity, a stage that we're built to go into emotionally. That's where we grapple with that and we try to get engaged with it. And one of those, that can be volunteering, right? You can go anywhere. That could be volunteering in any possible way you want. That could be philanthropy. That is a huge thing. If you feel like, I made a difference in a nonprofit's life, in what they're doing or a mission, or I made a difference. And mentoring is the one where this is how we pass down all of our family traditions, our holidays, our religions. Those did not go away during COVID. We
Hmm.
saw people even getting online and doing their holidays and mass with each other around the world. And those are the kinds of things that, we can't get rid of. We must have them. And when we think of mentorship, I always say that term was hijacked by corporate America and given a term that had nothing to do with anything other than work. But mentorship is everything outside of work. It's how we celebrate every bit of our lives, our values. If you hold a value true, you will want to pass that down to the next generation. If you feel like you have some kind of morals that you hold strongly with, it's something that you probably mentor the next generation with. In terms of how we can become more meaningfully connected with others, mentorship can take place online. That can take place in person. It can take place with people that you already know to your left and to your right. There's lateral mentoring. These are all things that can really help to combat loneliness because you have to have a two-way street of reciprocal, one person saying, I want what you're giving, and one person saying, I want to give this.
Mm.
That bonds you together in a way that is very meaningful. And you know somebody's got your back. And that's the same with the mentor and the mentee. They both feel that trusted connection.
Yeah, well, that's, a perfect lead into the main topic as to why I brought you onto the show, which is to discuss, this idea of mentorship, bringing new experiences and enthusiasm back into our lives. But specifically, I'd like to discuss this, the mentor-mentee dichotomy. And in our lives, is it ever too late to become a mentee or to exist as both a mentor and a mentee?
Oh, it's all the time. It's a circle, it's a spider web. There is no, everyone thinks of it as hierarchical, right? And there's a wise individual who's, pouring knowledge into someone that's a newbie. But it can go in any direction. If I were in an ad agency and I said, I'm going to try to sell things to Gen Z, I better not work with a whole bunch of Gen Xers and boomers on that. I'm going to need an expert who's going to mentor me and what it's like for a Gen Zer to want to go buy something. We
Mm.
see those mistakes happening in business world because they're not finding the experts who, because they're saying they're in the wrong direction. Everyone says, oh, reverse mentoring is for tech, for young people to teach old people tech. I'm like, whatever. Think of everyday life. You have to know how to navigate with every generation in order to get through things. So our hierarchy is really skewed for the business world in terms of climbing a ladder of promotion, as opposed to looking at it as an emotional interaction with people. Generations need to be able to do that in order to sell, to buy, to find out what the cultural values are. We have that with voting every 4 years where they say we need to get out the vote of the young people. Well, and different groups, things like that. Mentoring is something that helps you to find out what those cultural phenomena are, how people are really thinking, because you're tapping into someone, getting their expertise on that.
That's interesting because it does, just as you speaking about that, changes my perspective of mentorship. Because I would say, in general, when people think of mentorship, perhaps there's this idea of ageism in
Oh,
mentorship, where we think of, as you mentioned, this wise sage individual imparting their wisdom upon the young on how to live their lives. But it can be, you can learn from anybody. And mentorship shouldn't be defined by this idea of the sage, the wise old
no.
sage. It should be this having somebody who is knowledgeable in a field imparting
Yeah.
their knowledge to anybody.
That's why we had a couple of years ago that phrase, okay, boomer. People were like, I don't want what you're given. You are trying to impart all this wisdom onto me. Keep it to yourself. It was not resonating.
Mm.
And so that phrase came out, which was basically people saying, don't come at me with, I have all the wisdom and the words. And yes, ageism is a part of all of this, but ageism goes in two directions. People who are younger feel unheard. They don't feel like they're taken seriously. And older adults also feel unheard and like they're not taken seriously. So we have this dismissiveness in two directions. It's because there's not a meaningful connection there. But if we were to look at, really mentorship, there's a term that I coined, lateral mentoring. And it was because I was meeting with all the tech people and entrepreneurs. They don't have anybody above them. They don't even have anybody below them. They're starting something brand new. The only way they can look is to the left and to the right.
Mm.
And then I noticed that, if you're a hardware engineer, you're going to contact a software engineer and say, I need to have this happen. So Apple was developed that way. Atari was built that way. All of the big companies that we now sort of have in our background that we take for granted were not built in a garage by one person. It was a lateral mentor who was there, who was helping to support that. But what we also see is in very hierarchical places, people will have found ways to be lateral in how they mentor. So if you're in a hospital setting, there's no doctor that's going to go say, "Ooh, I have a surgery coming up. I have no idea how to do this." That they're not going to go to their boss and say that. What they do instead is they do a curbside consult. They go up to somebody and say, "Hey, I see you've done a lot of those surgeries. What did you how did you go about that?" You're not exposing your vulnerability. You're tapping into the wisdom of somebody who's done a bunch of those. We'll see that in grand rounds. We'll see that in, the proverbial water cooler discussions that people have where they're able to go and just ask a question. In the legal system in the United States, they had federal judges in Iowa who started a mentoring program that they didn't call a mentoring program, but it was specifically to allow for lateral mentoring because a judge also can't come in and say, "Whew, I've got a case coming up. No idea how I'm going to do that. I'm ready to wing it." Like nobody's going to like that. So what you can do with an informal lunch, though, that's lateral is you can have somebody say, "Hey, Jim, I know you've done a case like that. How did you manage that?" You're not
Mm.
exposing any vulnerability. You're having a lateral conversation with somebody who's an expert in a different area and is helping you. You are now the mentee. And that can be any age, any generation when you talk about lateral. It removes the ageism from it and makes it a much more flat, accessible connection.
Right. So, where do you feel we are in a societal change in mindset of mentorship? Are we still clinging to this hierarchical
Yeah.
idea? And is there a movement besides what you're doing, but in general, are you seeing
No.
changes to and the beginnings of lateral mentorship?
No. That's why I'm really that's why I wanted to write the book. I keep hearing people say, "Become an inspiring mentor." And I want to bang my head against a wall because it makes mentorship a burden. Oh, I have to learn how to tap dance now? Oh my goodness, I have to be inspiring. A mentee is always inspired by the mentor if it's actually a mentoring relationship. You do not have to change who you are and become inspiring. Or you hear about the toxic mentor. There's no such thing. You're just not a mentor. It's like saying, you know, um, you know, it's like making a friend. If you go out and you make a friend, you don't hang around the toxic people. You say they're not going to be my friend. We organically know how to do this. And mentorship is the same thing. It is not mentorship if there's some horrible person who's stealing from you or is toxic in some way or berates you. Mentors do not have to be inspiring and try to rouse the mentee. If you're in that position, it's not a mentoring relationship. That's all. That's not a failure. That's not something bad. It's just like saying, these 10 people crossed my path. They're amazing individuals, but am I going to have dinner with them every Friday and go bowling or do whatever I do with my friends? No, they're still good people. We didn't make that kind of connection. And I think that it's very, um, it's very off-putting in many ways, the term mentor, because people feel like you have to do a lot. You have to grab some handbook and figure out how to have this relationship. And it removes all the organic aspects of it and makes it feel like you're in an arranged marriage of sorts that you have to navigate every day.
What I'd like to do is talk about the mentor project and the genesis of that. How did that come about for you as you are, both the CEO and founder of the nonprofit organization? When, how, and where were you inspired to create that?
So when I was pivoting and looking at what is it that we really want in life, what can we expect that's on what is our normal trajectory, not our pathology trajectory. When I came across generativity, I said to myself, I really am interested in looking at mentorship because we're taking a component of ourselves and putting that out into the world. And I was really curious about it because I've only heard up until that point about the mentee.
Hmm.
The mentor was this nameless, faceless individual. It was go find a mentor. Who was that person? Where do you find them? And are they like lurking behind a bush? Like, who are these people? And so I wanted to start asking people who said they mentor about being mentors. So I interviewed about 45 people. And I went across the board from four-star general to grandma, to look at what people said. And they all said the same thing. They all so many people cried when they told me how meaningful it was to them, to that they felt like they mattered in the world, like that they made an impact. It was so moving to them. And they also were saying how hard it was to find a mentee. No one was ever telling anybody, go find a mentee, but there also weren't any mentees around in some cases. So in one case, Bill Cheswick, who's one of the fathers of the firewall, he said, I really want to have a mentee. I'm getting ready to retire from Bell Labs and I'm going to be moving to a farm. And the joke that was, put out there at the time was that he could not go to a park and say, "Hey kid, do you want a mentor?" There's that it's weird and awkward. How do you tell people you have an expertise and then, find the people who are going to want to have it? So I found tons of people who couldn't, they had nowhere to give back. And it wasn't because they were social isolates. It's because they weren't around people who wanted it.
Mm.
So we started with Bill and a couple of other people to get them into schools to, and the idea was to get kids to learn STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math at a young age and get exposure to that. And Bill was having a great time. Some of the other mentors were really having a great time. We had only a few people. We started with 7 people. And somebody told me, we decided to incorporate in 2019, and that was in August. And I was told right around that time, like, why are you doing that? Nobody is ever going to join. Why would anyone who's an expert in anything, who's really as high level as, say, Bill and some of the other people who were with NASA and did some amazing things, why would they want to? They're going to be too busy. They aren't going to want to spend their time giving back. And I realized this is how we all think, that people will say, I don't want to ask a person for help because they feel like they're going to burden them, or that they are going to, it will be some kind of off-putting thing. So I said, well, all right, we'll be these 10 people now that just do this. But within 6 months, we went from 10 to 60, then to 80, and then to 100 before the year was out, of mentors who are, astronauts, 7-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee, a famous artist. Everyone has
Mm.
changed the world in some way. And they were coming to us. They were saying, I want to mentor. I didn't put a big sign up and say, fancy people wanted. It was, they were saying, I need this. I need to feel relevant, validated. I need to feel like I'm useful, like I matter. People wanted a deeper footprint and they wanted to see a footprint. And so that was something quite remarkable. And the mentors don't leave.
Mm.
Our mentors have been with us for a long time, for years. And people said, oh, you can't ask them to do more than, say, 2 hours a month because they're going to be, too busy. And this is just a burden on them. And I have a hard time keeping up with getting mentees for our mentors because they want more and more. It's so gratifying and satisfying to see a bit of you living on in somebody else. And so the lesson learned is that mentors are looking for mentees just as much as mentees are looking for mentors. And that's where we needed to have the mentor perspective out there so that people could see that this is not a one connection, isn't a one way where you're grabbing. You have a hand coming down and a hand coming up, or you have a
Mm.
hand going across in 2 different ways. It's not just one floating out in the world.
Right. So you really found that you were addressing a need that was out there for people to become mentors. But
Yeah.
you say you in some instances you're now having trouble finding enough mentees. Is there a reluctance on the part of people to embrace a mentor?
I think that people still think of mentorship as work related. We're working with students. And so students won't think they need it, or they are intimidated by it. And once they start there, it's unbelievable the progress that they make. So I think that it's understanding what it's all about. I think that a lot of the students that I talk to feel like they don't know how to, they think that they have to carry it, that they have to come in with specific questions and with specific things on the agenda. and that they're going to be meeting with this person every week. It's like going to confession. They're going to have to like come prepared, and that they're going to have to go away with homework. It feels like school. That's not what mentorship is about.
Mm,
Mentorship is emotional relationship. It is not a job interaction. The mentor has a deep desire to see the mentee get to where they want to go. And so it's a really amazing journey for the mentee once they get to there, because they don't have to come in prepared with a booklet full of things that they want and need. They just have to be able to say to themselves, that person has something I want. How can we make it so that I can have a bit of that knowledge, that value, that door that can be opened, that exposure to something? That's all it really has to be. And if someone also realizes that you could do it once and that's still considered mentorship, if you've taken something from somebody and you go use it, you do not have to think that that is somebody that you're with forever.
right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, there's this a sense of obligation that comes with the word mentorship that is not involved in the definition of what mentorship is.
So the best mentor mentee relationship should be somewhat organic in
Yeah.
nature. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, through the mentor project, how do you make a good mentor mentee match? Because it almost sounds like it's kind of like maybe a dating site, or is there something different to it? When people apply, are people reviewing their application, saying, "Oh, I think these two could work well together"? Are mentees, given a choice of who they may want as a mentor? How does that process work?
So we're getting ready to transition to a new platform, but it'll be the same process. So, you know, really what happens is a mentee will look and they'll say, this is the kind of mentorship I want. And they have to fill out forms. You just don't say, hey, give me a mentor. They have to go on and they have to fill out forms. And within that, they're saying what they're interested in and who they might want to work with. Now, they may say, I don't know. I just don't even know what I don't know. And that's okay. But if they have certain things that they're interested in, then we can often say, here's some suggested people if they don't know of somebody. A lot of people come in and they say, I want to meet with this person. What we always do is we say, meet with these three others as well, because you don't know what you don't know. And you may find out that somebody with a completely different background is somebody that you would find interest in. And that's just to do it, you never know. Some of the most unusual pairings have been some of the most successful.
Hmm.
So, is it like a dating site? Maybe a tiny little bit in the sense that a person is looking at somebody's profile. And, a person may come in and say, I'm interested in the astronaut, not the puppeteer. That there's that in that way, it could be it. But otherwise, we do try to really make sure that everybody is meeting with way more than they thought that they should come in with, because those have really helped. We also have groups. So you can join a research group, an innovation lab. We've done hackathons. We have panels that we offer so that people can either in person, if they're near the location, or virtually see some of the panels of the people speaking so they can say, I didn't even know that existed. I'm going to change what I thought my major was going to be, or I'm going to try this out. So we offer a lot of different things so that people can get exposed in many different ways.
Right. So, in some ways, what is then the differentiator between a mentor and, say, a counselor, as opposed to like the traditional high school guidance counselor?
So I say this to my students all the time. I say, I am your advisor. I'm paid to be your advisor. I do a great job with you because I care about you and I'm going to do all of that. So that may feel like mentoring when they're saying, what should I do? How should I move forward? Well, I'm being paid to do that with you. That
Hmm.
is my job description. Do some of my students leave the classroom that they are working with me and become mentees? Yes, that happens. I'm not being paid then. That's outside of school. That's outside of where that is. If you're a guidance counselor, you're being paid to do that. That is your job. You should be counseling somebody and doing a good job with that. If you are a leader, there are components of mentorship that should be in that make you a good leader. If you're not doing those things, you're a bad leader or you're a bad counselor or a bad advisor. So the difference though with those relationships is the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivator that's put there.
Okay, so it would seem like, the best place from which mentorship can come from is this idea of a non-obligational
Yeah.
relationship, that
Yes.
you are doing this because you have a true, um, you know, altruistic desire to help.
Yes. So does that happen in a hierarchical work environment? It does. So I'll give you an example. This one is in the book. Irene Yakubus she was someone who worked in NASA. She was the person that pushed the button for the launch to the mission to Mercury. She was a lead tech person on that. She went to IBM afterwards.
Hmm.
And she got there, and here's a person who's so successful, so smart, so amazing. And she was afraid. She was like, I don't know the lay of the land of this place. I don't know how this place operates. It's so different from NASA and all the other places, that she had worked. And so she happened to go to an in-house sort of conference thing that they offered, and there were a panel of people speaking. They were all much higher up than she was. And one of the people at the end of her talk said, and if anyone would like a mentor, I'm available. So she came back and she called me and she said, oh my gosh, I would love to ask her to mentor me, but I'm afraid. I'm brand new here. She's going to be like, what in the world? And so her vulnerability kicked in and she was afraid. So I said, okay, email her and say, I just heard you talk. I know that you said that you would want to mentor. And I said, give her a goal that you have. And so she wrote that she wanted the lay of the land. She wanted to see what the departments do, what each thing, what each area does, so that she could understand how to navigate in this company. The person emailed her back in 15 minutes and said yes. They're still in touch years later. And she mentored her for way beyond that first goal, and they had different goals. So that happens. That person wasn't being paid. She asked for it, for a mentee. And then Irene happened to say, yes, I'll do that. That happens all the time in work. That was not, that person did not ever put that in her performance evaluation. Neither of them did. They just did it. And you see that all the time at work.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an amazing takeaway, because I do feel that perhaps, and this is just me speaking on behalf of myself, and you can tell me more, but in a lot of cases, there are people out there, the mentee, who would like to have a mentor, but are afraid to reach out. But
Yeah.
as you say, these people that are in potentially mentor positions are actually really wanting to help. And we shouldn't be fearful, because there's a very, very good possibility that if we do ask them to help us, to mentor us, that they are more likely than not to agree to it.
Yes, I think that you make a great point there, which is that the burden has always been on the mentor, right? That they better go change the life of some people. And really, it's the mentee has to go find who it is that they want something from. And it should not be a life-changing ask. You should be going to somebody and saying, can I pick your brain for a minute? Can you tell me the lay of the land of this place? That's an easy lift. Then you can figure out, do I like the person? Do I trust the person? Is this somebody I'd want to talk more with? And then you can see if you develop a relationship. Mentorship isn't like, here we go. It's not like Velcro, like you
Mm.
put two people together and you're set. It happens over time, just like friendship and anything else. It's a relationship. Mentorship is emotional. It's not a transaction. And so if you don't feel that, then it's not mentorship.
I believe you said the mentor project started in the 20 teens, and you worked on that for quite a while, which then led to you authoring the book, The Mentorship Edge.
Yeah.
Can you speak to, what the book covers, and is it derived out of the experiences that you encountered in running the mentor project?
Yes. So what I really thought needed to happen was a definition of mentorship. And it comes from, I didn't make it up. It comes from theory and research and, all the components that go into it and what makes mentorship. And I also brought into it what mentorship isn't, how it's different from coaching, how it's different from um, advising and sponsorship and networking, and how you can use them all together. You should never have, I've got a coach, I'm good to go. I have a mentor, I'm good to go. You should be getting all of these things, getting involved in all of them. And that's part of the whole connection, becoming a better connected person. Um, which helps to combat loneliness and everything else, is all of these factors should be used. And most people are just subscribing to one, thinking they've got it all covered. So, all of that, I give examples of how it looks for people in different fields. Charlie Camarda was saved while he was in space by a lateral mentor. I talk about the tech revolution and how that happened with lateral mentoring. I give examples of hierarchical mentoring and how that looks. I give examples from the Bible and how it's been around for centuries, and how all the religions have a component of generativity and mentorship in it. And so I really try to just give a really broad view while giving really detailed examples of real life mentorship and how it looks in different ways. So I think that, when people are reading it, they're being able to take away something that they can do that's super actionable in their own life, whether at work or in their personal life.
Mm. So after reading the book, would you feel people would be inspired to take on the mentorship role, take on the mentee role? Where, if one were to read the book, where would you hope it would lead them to go?
I think that everyone so far who's read the book has said, I didn't know I was a mentor. I am a mentor. And they just weren't realizing it. And they then were able to realize, wow, I was mentored by somebody. Because a lot of people will say, oh, I've never had a mentor. And then this helps to show, yeah, you have. And it might have been a small act and you just didn't realize it. So, the real takeaway for people reading it is you should, first of all, be able to see that you have mentored, that you also have been a mentee, and you'll find new ways to do it. I think the biggest thing that people should be looking for is the ability to acknowledge when you are and when you are not. And that way, when you are, you already know your footprint just grew. The footprint is what most of us are looking for. When you hear the word legacy, people think, oh, generational wealth or something like that. They think of something big and abstract, when really it could be just the accumulation of many, many footprints that we make in many different directions. And when people see that, it really makes you feel fulfilled.
Right. So it sounds to me like what we need moving forward, and this would be uh, maybe a purpose of the book, is a redefinition of mentorship in the modern era.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so we've talked about all the amazing and positive components of mentorship, but let's just take another look at that. And, what could be perhaps some of the negativity around mentorship? So, for instance, like what could be some of the biggest frustrations with being a mentor?
So, when I hear people say what their frustrations are, sometimes it's a lack of knowledge in how to interact with a generation that you're not used to interacting with. So some of the mentors will say, my mentee doesn't get back to me all the time. I don't know if they want another meeting or not. And the mentee is sitting there and they're like young. And so they're like, well, when I get around to it, I'll do it. And they're not being, disrespectful, really. They're not trying to be. There's just a communication difference. Some people are really, and particularly some of the older generations, are really used to having very prompt responses. And some of the younger generations are learning how to interact with others, but not to take it personally.
So, to be a good mentor, I think managing expectations and ego must be a big part of it, because there must be instances where somebody is like, I'm providing this person with all, this advice, these insights, and either they're not listening to me, or they're completely ignoring what I'm saying, or did the exact opposite of what I told them.
Yeah, there can be all of those. And that's when the reflection goes back to, is this a mentoring relationship? Or is this one that isn't? You have to then determine that. Most cases they are. It's just a communication difference. It's not, I'm not putting a right or wrong on either. If you're young and you are normally communicating with your peers in a specific way, you don't know how to interact with somebody who's 4 generations above you. who maybe likes to talk on the phone or get on Zoom instead of having a, texting on a platform kind of a relationship. So I think that the biggest takeaway is that when you're connecting with people, there's a lot of bending that has to happen on both parts.
Sounds very similar to a lot of frustrations that are encountered in parenting.
Absolutely. It's very similar.
So, as we bring this back to a close and go full circle, when we were discussing about your progress to where you got into today and your history with psychology, what can we look forward to as we age, and what can we do to bring a new exciting chapter in our lives in regards to either mentorship or menteeship?
So the things we should be looking forward to is feeling like our time is our own. We should be feeling like our connections are the ones that we have curated and they're our own. They're not attached to kids' friends. They're not attached to the superficial things we were doing when we were younger. They're the ones that we say, who could I call at 3 a.m. for something good or something bad? And we should also be looking forward to dropping little apples of wisdom along the way that make sure that it's kind of like breadcrumbs of knowledge as we're moving through the rest of our life, where we are picking the people who are going to take that information, and we're picking the places that we want that to be and the things that we value the most. So we should be thinking not just work. Nobody remembers the accountant from 300 years ago, but everybody remembers the family traditions, the smells of the holiday meals, the values that we have, the things that make our families feel secure and the operational, the things that make us feel like we have a footprint. Those are all the deep emotional things. So work is one thing that you could say, yeah, I'm going to pass something on. But usually it's something that a person is going to say, I'm going to pass on this knowledge to somebody that I think is going to do this thing in the world that's going to make it better, that I am now passing the baton to that person to do that. So that's how we're looking at it. We're not looking at it as the knowledge transfer where we don't have any connection to the future with it. And that's a hopeful outlook.
Yes. And for me, that encapsulates everything that the Humdrumedy podcast is hoping to achieve for every listener. Okay. Some very amazing and thought-provoking information you've provided us today. And Deborah, I'd really like to thank you for mentoring us through this time together.
And thank you for mentoring everyone, because a podcaster is a modern mentor. So thank you for mentoring the world.
Well, I didn't know. I'm glad now I can wear the mantle of mentor.
You are.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, you have a terrific day.
You too. Take care.
So whether we know it or not, we have been mentors and mentees throughout our lives. Never be reluctant to give or take advice, no matter with whom you are engaging. Meaningful connections lead to betterment for all. The Mentor Project is open to students from around the world, and I highly recommend exploring its website at mentorproject.org, especially if you know of a teen or young adult looking for mentorship guidance. Also, be sure to check out my guest book, The Mentorship Edge, which is available for purchase from Amazon. Don't forget to follow Humdrumedy on your favorite podcast app, and be sure to spread the word if you enjoy the content you're hearing right here. All right, until next time, take care.